Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Early Years Learning Hub podcast. My name is Jackie Ward, and I'm the founder and managing director of the Early Years Learning Hub. This podcast episode is one of our series Practice Sharing, and today we are talking with Catherine Lee, director at Catherine Lee Consulting. Catherine has had an amazing career as an early childhood teacher, service director, speaker, and facilitator, and is a great inspiration to myself and many others. And today we'll be talking about community connections. And this is something that Catherine does so amazingly well. So I'm going to hand over to Catherine. Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your professional journey?
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you for inviting me today. I'm speaking from Dharawal country, and I have been teaching for just over 43 years, and it has been the absolute joy of my life. I don't know what else I could have chosen that would have brought me so much joy. So I started out as a teacher in a centre when I was 21. And after about 3 months, it was a 40-place centre run by a council. After about 3 months, the director left and I became the director. And that was a really steep learning curve for me. I stayed there for about 3 years, and it really brought me not only a lot of joy, but a lot of connection with community, and a community that I wasn't really a part of. I didn't live around there. A community that was facing a lot of problems and issues, third generation unemployed, lots of single young parents. It made me feel that there was something there that I could support those families and those children. And that has, my experiences there really I've carried them with me the whole of my teaching career. And then I moved to another community-based preschool, another 40-place centre, and I stayed there for about 5 years, and that was amazing. And then I did a postgraduate in educational studies and specialised in early childhood special education and moved into early intervention for about 10 and a half years. And then I moved from there back into preschool, and I was at a community-based preschool, just 20 children a day. And I was there for just over 24 years. But in between all of that, I've done a lot of talking to educators, a lot of speaking at conferences, both in Australia and overseas. I've worked for CELA, for Gowrie, for Macquarie University, for Saman and Slattery, for a lot of different groups. And I also worked, while I was working full-time, worked part-time at New South Wales TAFE, and taught the Certificate 3 and the Diploma in Early Childhood Studies. And here I am now, still enjoying and loving the joy that children bring, and being and having amazing discussions with educators and supporting families. And I have my own consultancy business now.
Wow, what an interesting and varied career. I love that. I didn't know you worked in early intervention. That was news to me.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's amazing. And I think it's all those things that give you like a really rich woven tapestry of professional experience, isn't it? And I
Very much.
love too that you're so passionate about working with young children. Like I love to hear really passionate teachers, educators, and leaders, because I think, especially at a time like now with our sector that's in a bit of crisis, it's nice to hear that,
Yes.
like that passion and enthusiasm is still there. And we've got some really great teachers and leaders, and I think, we need to celebrate them. So thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Yes.
I'm really, really keen to unpack sort of what does community mean a little bit, because I think, if we think about it in education and care services and even schools, there's that requirement to connect with community. But I think it's one of those sometimes sort of a term that we think, what is your community? Who is in your community? What does it mean to you? Who makes up your community, and what are we trying to achieve when we're connecting with communities? Yeah, I'm interested to hear a little bit about what community means to you. What are your thoughts about what communities are and what people and organisations and groups make up your community?
Always see communities like a circle, and within that circle there's lots and lots of different people, our immediate families, neighbours, extended families, friends, but also people that might be within the neighbourhood, and then there's people outside our neighbourhoods coming in. And I see it as a place of shared responsibility, and that shared responsibility is to have values of being kind and honest and being good citizens and helping each other. And now, too, our community is quite global, and we can have those connections as well with people who aren't, physically here, but who have the same values as you do and who are maybe overseas or in another state. And I think that within that community, one of the most important groups is our children. They're not on the edge of the community. They should be right in the middle where we are surrounding them with love and protection and joy and caring and nurturing them and valuing them for the most amazing, competent citizens that they are right now.
It's funny you should say that, like a circle, because I can't help but think about community and think about children at the centre and Brofenbrenner's theory, that
Yes,
whole
yes.
idea that we're all there to support children. But the other thing, like I think that, that idea that you do so well about, and I think we're probably going to talk about that, but making children seen within their community and bringing their voices out into the community. Children have
Yes.
a lot to offer their community, don't they?
Yes, they do. And I remember a few years before my mum died, she would say to me, if we were out, where are the children? I don't see children anymore. And I would say, oh, they're at school or they're in long daycare or, they're at sport. But where she was just walking around her community, going to the local shops, going to the park, she wasn't seeing them as much. And I think that's something that we really need to do is to make our children more visible. And we can do that by sharing their voices and their curiosities and their ideas because they have so many wonderful ideas. And I know that for my mum, seeing children brought her so much joy. And because our children are in early childhood centres a lot during the days, there are children who aren't being seen as much. And we need to make sure that that continues to happen, that they're visible.
That is so true that we need to take on that role, don't we, if they're
Ah,
spending more time
yes.
in our
Mm.
services. So can you tell us maybe you've already covered this, but why is connecting with community so important? And do you think it's changed as we've become more global and electronically connected?
I think it has changed. And also that little bit that I just spoke about children not being visible. But it's still so important that children do feel that they are part of a community as well. And within our services, that is a community in itself. And that's important that children feel that sense of belonging, that love, that protection, that care and nurturing there, as well as in the broader community as well.
Yeah.
Children have so many ideas to contribute. They have so many theories about things. They have so much joy to bring. And we really need to make sure that they are active participants so that people can see the value in our children.
And there's so many great resources within our communities, aren't there? If we think about parks or,
Yes.
natural spaces, libraries, all of that sort of stuff are at our
Yeah.
disposal that we could then introduce children to if they haven't gone there with their families.
Yes. And when you had sent me some questions to think about for today's conversation, I recalled about when I was teaching at a community-based preschool next door, there was a reserve and the council were going to renovate the playground. And so the council asked the children that I was learning and teaching beside if they could have some suggestions. And the children had so many suggestions, Jackie, just so many. And they drew plans. And when representatives from the council came, they were actually overwhelmed that the
Mm.
children had so many ideas and that they had thought about these things so much. And children had their plans all rolled up, just as people doing council and they rolled them out and, this should go here and we think we want this. And I just remember how much in awe they were and they listened. They really listened and they did incorporate nearly everything that the children wanted, which was wonderful. Such a genuine and authentic acknowledgement of children.
Process, yeah. It's funny, isn't it? That's something I've heard a few times that, councils involve children in parks and things, but I often think to myself, well, I'd like to think they might involve them in other things because they're going to be the future users of all those other things as well. But yeah, at least it's parks. It's a good start. So
Good stuff.
can you talk about some of what you think are the benefits for children and families about connecting with the community?
I think the biggest benefit is just having an understanding of who is in your community, um, and knowing that you're an important part of that community. I think it supports children and it supports all of us to have an understanding of culture, of fairness, of kindness. It also allows children to know who is there to nurture them and care for them, what sort of ethics people have, what can we do to work together to achieve something, what ideas can I bring. Um, and as I mentioned, children have so many ideas, but if we're not encouraging them to put those ideas out there, they won't know that they can have an impact on what's happening. And we don't want children to feel they have to wait until they leave school before they can have an impact on their community. They can do that right now. I think also too, families are our children's first teachers, as we know, and they hold all these stories and knowledge about our children. And it's really important as part of the community that the community hears those stories, understands children, that they just don't live in isolation. What something that is happening in this situation could be influencing children's learning, their growth. It could be influencing how they're seeing the world. All those stories from the family side as well as the children's side need to be shared in the community as well.
Yeah, that makes up the fabric of community, doesn't it? Some of my favorite stories from your career, Catherine, of that you've shared about some of the things, that your children were, reflecting and thinking about some packaging that, some toys or equipment was sent in and that they wrote a letter. Or I'll let you tell the story, but also another one where you talked about, a child went to school and put their hand up and said, "Are we going to vote on that?" So I'm really interested in that whole concept you've mentioned already of civics and citizenship and that
Yes,
idea of agency for children in
yes.
influencing things. So would you like to talk a little bit about those stories or others?
Yes, there's been so many. I do remember those two stories. One was we had a delivery of something and the children were helping to unpack it, and we very much looking at sustainability and how we could be supporting our planet and just our little place where the children were learning every day. And a child decided that the packaging, after we all discussed it, it wasn't good packaging. It was plastic. It would just go into landfill. And so that child wanted to write a letter to the company and thank them for the packages that we got, but suggested that they actually look at a more sustainable way to send and to pack the goods. And that child got a letter back to saying because of their voice, because of what was important to them, that they were going to look into changing. And then they got another letter to say that the company did actually change and went to a more environmentally friendly type of packaging, which was just amazing. And it was fantastic for that company, but also it really did support the children's agency. All the children, they saw that their words and their voice meant something and could change things. And it made children see that they are change, agents of change, and that's what our community needs. The other story, what did you say it was? Sorry.
Oh, you told a story one time about how someone had transitioned off
Oh,
to
yes.
school and they'd put their, "Are we gonna vote on that?" And I thought, because I know that you do a lot of that sort of
Yes.
democratic approach in your, work with children.
Yes, that was on the first day of school, and it was a big assembly, and the principal was speaking and talking about some rules. And this child thought that one of the rules was a little bit unfair and put their hand up and was asked because the principal was surprised that somebody did have a question, and the child did ask, are we going to vote on that? And they were very surprised when they were told, no, that is the rule. There's no voting. But it was that story came back to me from the principal saying I knew exactly what preschool that child had come from.
Yeah,
And it's important that there are expectations. There are some rules probably at school that do need to be set and can't be changed. But that child did go on to be part of the student representative committee or board,
council,
whatever.
yeah.
Council, yes. But Other times we've had children who, when we've been out walking and connecting to country, have noticed that there was a lot of dog poo around and they didn't want to step in it naturally. One day I did when we were walking,
Oh.
and the group of children were like, nope, something has to be done. And they came up with a little slogan, a little chant. They made posters and ended up with some of their posters being displayed as an art exhibition at the local cafe, because I had been following this cafe on social media and had seen that they were also concerned with the amount of dog poo, particularly out the front of their cafe. And I told that to the children, and the children said, well, we have to take the posters down there. And it was wonderful because they were coming from the point of view that they didn't want the dogs to be in trouble because it wasn't the dog's fault.
Mm,
It
wow.
was as the owner, and you had the responsibility to pick it up because the dog couldn't. And they didn't want, there was a lot of talk about we love dogs, but it was, please pick up your dog poo along the way with their little chant that they had. And they made a little movie, lots and lots of posters put out at the front of the preschool next to the reserve. One child suggested, what if somebody takes their dog for a walk and doesn't have a bag? What should we do? So some parents donated some compostable bags, and we had a bunch of bags available for people if they'd forgotten their bags as well. So it did spread out into the community. Their action was very positive, and there was a huge reduction in dog poo.
Oh, that's great. I love the fact that you've really, opened up these opportunities for children to learn significant, really big life skills about the idea of that they're capable and competent to have an influence in their world, which is all of the stuff about agency, isn't it? And that idea
Oh,
that
yeah.
children understand the idea of voting for things. But, also good to note that, not everything is a vote, but, we have some rules for safety and all those sorts of things. But I'm guessing a lot of that comes from the conversations that you're listening to and then responding to and building on projects and
Yes.
explorations with children, because you can hear what are children concerned about, and that you've sort of, I guess, set the frame up for them to know that they can do something about it is another thing.
Yes, I think it's listening to what's important to them. And there's lots of things. Children have so many opinions and curiosities and ideas of things that could be changed, could be made better, something that they would like to see done a little bit differently. And it's being open to hearing all those things, but also then what's probably a little bit more important is then doing something about that, so that children are seeing, well, those adults listened to me, but nothing changed. We don't want them to see that. We want
Yeah.
them to know we said this and it's important to us. And we had discussions about it. And those discussions aren't just in one day, they're over a period of time. And now we've come up with these ideas. We're going to implement those. We're going to see if these actions will make any difference. And then this changed. And now this is better how this is working. But if you don't act on their voice, then that deep listening is just not there. And
Yeah.
it's not going to be supporting children in their relationships and how they feel that a community works.
Well, and I guess to take a step back from that again is the idea that you're actually going out of your preschool and, you talk about your walks on country, which I think is a great way to, just a simple walk in your local area is a great way to connect children with Aboriginal perspectives and
Yes,
traditions and culture as well.
very much.
Have
And
you?
connecting with the land and seeing just the landscape, the landmarks. And we were very fortunate in the last centre that I was teaching at that there were some very significant landmarks around that were important to Aboriginal people in a time before there was houses in that area. And we could tell those stories. And that's a really important part of community as well, is handing down stories that are important to children. I remember when one time I walked past a tree and it was rebarking, but you could still see the indentation of where a canoe had been carved out of it. And it was a very significant tree. And I was feeling it and touching it. And one child said to me, what will happen when all the bark covers it up, who will know that story? And I said, the tree will still know the story, I'll still know the story, and you'll still know the story. And that's really important that we keep telling that story, even when that mark is covered up.
How beautiful. And you've also done some connections with local Aboriginal people within your community as well, haven't you? I remember you did a beautiful
Yes.
mosaic. You had someone come in and work with the children. Would you like to tell us about those connections within your community as well?
Those connections take a while to make connections. And when you do, it is so enriching for everybody. And I had the pleasure of working with the late Darawal elder and knowledge holder, Uncle Les Bursell, who became a very good friend of mine as well. And just every interaction that we would have, I would learn something more. But it also opened up for me realizing that I didn't know a lot of things that he was passing on to the children, because those sort of things weren't discussed when I was at school. And so not only are those connections so enriching for our young children, they're enriching for everybody of everybody's age. And we had an idea one time that we would like to make a mosaic. Not that we've ever made one before,
Yeah.
but we thought, we're teachers, we're creative, we can do this. We did a lot of different art, and I contacted a mosaic artist. He'd never worked with children before, and he'd love to, and he'd never worked with any Aboriginal elders, and he would really like to. I contacted Les. He was very happy to jump into something he'd never done before. So there was three of us who had this grand idea. And as it was, we thought it would be a small mosaic about this big. It turned out it's massive, massive. And we thought it might take a few weeks. It took 3 months working on it every single day. But the wonderful thing was the word spread, and sometimes there'd be a knock on the door and there would be people we didn't know, and they would say, we heard that you're doing this. We're friends of Uncle Les, or, could we come in? Is he here? And so we had then a lot of other Aboriginal people in the community coming to visit, coming to see what was being done. And some stayed. One person stayed and visited for quite a few weeks. And it was just that time where you could just be engaged in art in such a mindful experience, but also just having everyday conversations and finding out about other people's lives. And I think that was the beauty of that project, was much, much more than just producing this gorgeous mosaic. It was the relationships that we developed and the children developed in the in-between time.
That just sounds so amazing and inspirational, and just that idea of, so not just connecting out with community, but also inviting community in, even if it wasn't
Yes.
intentional, that's what
Yes.
happened, which is also amazing as well. And I couldn't agree more. I'm learning more and more every day about Aboriginal culture, traditions, history, knowledges,
Yeah.
and loving it. So, I'm on the co-learning journey with children around that. And I think that's, a great way to be. But also summing up, I'm thinking that I'm hearing from you too, that you're a facilitator and a connector, as well as a teacher and a leader, making these things happen and helping children's voices to be realised within the community. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us about connecting with community, Catherine? Well, you've shared some wisdom, so if that's all you've got to say, that's okay.
Connecting with community really does enrich all of us, our children, our families, us as educators, and then we can then also then enrich community. It's that two-way, like you spoke about, with the visitors coming in and us going out. It's also something that I think is really important to do. We can't be isolated in centres, just trapped within the fences and the walls as such. We need our children to be going out and to be experiencing the world that they live in the times that they're not in the early learning centres with us. And I think it just brings a really deep level of richness to our practice.
That is awesome. Now, is there anything that you would like, where can we find you if someone's interested to hear more of your story or to connect with you, get you to do some consulting work? Where can they find you?
You can find me on Facebook, on Catherine Lee Educational Consultant, and on LinkedIn. And I'll be very happy to connect with you and other people. As I said, it's still a joy for me And part of the joy that I have is being able to support and mentor other educators so that they can feel the joy that I do.
Well, that's amazing. Well, you've always been an inspiration and a mentor to me, even if you haven't known that consciously. I really appreciate your time and sharing your insights with us. So that wraps us up for another episode of the Early Years Learning Hub podcast. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll look forward to hearing you next time around.
Thanks, Jackie.